I'd like to thank the Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting Corporation, its president, John Signer, its board of directors, and thank them very much for allowing the Association of Counties again to talk with you here today. With us here today, I'm very pleased to have the Honorable Kathleen Jimino. Kathleen is the Rensselaer County, New York executive and has served in this capacity for 16 years. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thank you, Steve.
Kathy, unfunded mandates. We've talked a lot about unfunded mandates over the years. In your annual budget messages, you've talked about this issue of unfunded mandates. You've talked about it in your State of the County speeches as well, where you go out of your way in detail to describe unfunded mandates. For the folks that are watching us here today, what is an unfunded mandate and why does it matter to those that are watching us here today?
Well, Steve, it is something that I've talked about for years, and it was brought to my attention early on in my tenure that people are concerned about their property taxes being so high, and they don't understand why, and they're looking for an explanation from the county executive. And someone said, you really need to get out there and talk about this. Matter of fact, it might have been somebody at NYSAC. So I do talk about it. And unfunded mandates are those programs that are required to be provided per state law or federal law. And so we provide those services, but we don't always get the funding to fully pay for them. As a result, we're putting in a lot of local dollars to provide state and federal programs that are great programs. Some are very necessary programs, but they burden our property taxpayers. And as a result, New York State's property taxes are high compared to other states. It makes it difficult then to try to provide other local services without further burdening our property taxpayers.
Are these regulations or rules that you enact locally at the county level, or are these programs that are mandated by the state where you have no say in how they're administered or financed?
Yes, these are state program requirements, whether it's by law, whether it's by regulation, and we have little to no say about the rules. Who is eligible? How much are they eligible for? In what way must we provide these services? Yet we have to pay for the services. And it is a huge burden to our property taxpayers, and we have very little ability to impact that burden to our property taxpayers because we don't control the rules. So we can't ratchet in the costs of those programs readily.
Let's talk for a minute about how much of an impact it really is and what types of programs that we're talking about. So can you explain to the viewers here today a couple of these types of programs and how much of the property tax is consumed by these mandates in Rensselaer County and largely the other counties of New York?
Right. When we look at all of the taxes that we collect, whether it's property tax or sales tax or hotel motel tax, any of those types of taxes that people are paying, 89 cents of every dollar that they're paying in any of those taxes is going to these programs, to these state mandated programs. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Medicaid. Medicaid in Rensselaer County is about $34 million annually, well over half of our property tax levy. So half of your property tax dollars that you're paying to the county are going to pay for this one program. And there are countless other programs, so much so that, again, 89 cents of every dollar that we collect is already spoken for before we look at how can we put a budget together that addresses the needs of the residents in our county. We have 11 cents left to address those programs that are not mandated.
That sounds like a very difficult job, to be the chief executive of local government without having the authority or the ability to operate these programs and fund these programs. Is it like this in other states? Is New York unique in this regard?
New York is very unique in that regard, particularly when we come to the Medicaid program that I mentioned earlier, consuming half of our property tax levy. No other state imposes so much on the local level of the Medicaid costs as New York State does. I think it's well over $8 billion that we're paying at the local level. The next closest state, California, requires about $1.5 billion annually from their local governments. So you see that difference. And when you consider that the bulk of our revenue comes from either property tax or sales tax, it's understandable why local taxes, in terms of property taxes, are so much higher than any other state when we have that burden alone among so many others that we have to pay for out of our property taxes. And that makes it tough. It makes it tough to attract people into the state. It makes it tough to attract businesses into the state, not to mention keeping the ones that we have here, because everybody's looking at their bottom line. How much will it cost us for utilities? How much will it cost us for this, that, and the other thing? And then how much does it cost us for property taxes? Well, I can go to another state and pay significantly less in property taxes because that state does not require the local governments to contribute to the Medicaid program or so many of the other mandated programs that we have here.
Kathy, you've talked about 89 cents of the dollar collected locally going to Albany to pay for Albany-based programs, the state of New York's programs, leaving 11 cents. Let's talk a little bit about that 11 cents then. You've mentioned frequently in your State of the County addresses and your annual budget messages to the people of Rensselaer County how local programs and services are suffering. Can you expand a little bit about what you mean about having the ability to serve the community needs locally without having the resources to do so? What types of programs are being impacted by the situation the New York counties find themselves in?
Well, there are a lot of local services that people depend upon. Certainly our senior services. We run 5 senior centers that provide services at those locations and then services out to the community. Our services to our veterans, that is not mandated, and that's an important priority for us. Our services to our youth and how well we can support them in growing up to be good citizens. Our road patrol, our Sheriff's Road Patrol, that's not a mandated service, yet obviously very critical in order to keep families and businesses in Rensselaer County. How well we maintain our roads and bridges. That's predicated on how much we have left of that dollar of property tax. And with 11 cents, it gets very difficult to try to do all of that and more. We're a full-service health department, so we provide a lot of services that, again, are not mandated, but are critical to quality of life services in Rensselaer County. All of those tend to get squeezed as we look at a budget that needs to stay under the tax cap, and not just because that's the law, but because we know that our property taxpayers are paying too much already, so we want to be mindful of their purses and wallets. And that budget also has to address these growing mandated costs. While Medicaid is a fixed amount, every other mandated program continues to increase year after year after year. So those local services tend to be squeezed like in a vice because we only have so much money. And in fact, we want to be frugal about those. When we look at our seniors, we're often caught in the budget discussion about, do we cut senior services because they're not mandated and worry about people not getting good nutrition, not being able to stay in their homes, not being able to get some help to do that? Or do we raise the property taxes, which can be a burden, again, to keeping seniors in their home? So it makes for very difficult budget decisions year after year. How do we get that 11 cents to stretch as far as we need it to because of the pressure of those state mandates?
I'll say that sounds like a very complicated and complex situation that county leaders find themselves in. Can you talk just briefly here about what it's like to construct a budget? How does a county government propose its budget in Rensselaer County? Do you look at state reimbursement, which is partially funding, and you consider the property tax amount and forecasting sales tax amounts? Right. What's the process that's used to put together the county budget?
Well, in an ideal year, you anticipate some amount of growth in your property tax base because you're adding businesses, you're adding buildings, you're adding, exactly. In a good year, you also have growth in your sales tax because people are getting a little more income, they're spending more in our stores. Hopefully we're adding more stores that they can spend right here in Rensselaer County. And then that alleviates a little bit of the burden of those growing mandates. This year has been a good year the past couple of years as we have come out of the Great Recession. And so we've been able to put a little more into our roads. We've done about 1/3 of the roads in the last 3 years, which is really terrific what we want to do. Thank you. And we've been able to ensure that those services that are so necessary are continued. But in a bad year, what we have is the state mandated programs, those services that people rely on when they're having a bad time financially, our social services programs, et cetera. those programs grow, the caseloads grow because of the difficult economy. And our revenues are not growing, again, because of a difficult economy. If you've lost your job, you're not going to be out at the stores in Rensselaer County spending money, and we're not going to be collecting sales tax. So our revenue is depressed while our expenses are increasing. And that's the teeter-totter, if you will, of county budgets, and why it becomes so difficult in those years that the economy is bad to get that budget out there in a way that doesn't further burden our property taxpayers. Even in the good years, though, we're often dealing with that additional expense as more mandates are shifted, or the state or federal government decide that they want to expand those mandated programs to provide additional services and pass that bill to us to pay. So there's not been many, I will say, easy years when it comes to the county budget.
We're joined by Kathleen Jimino, the Rensselaer County Executive, who has served for 16 years as the County Executive of this fine county outside the Capital District here in New York State. Kathy, let's reflect before we let you go here this morning. Very grateful for your time that you've given us here. It's not an easy task to be a county leader. You've served in this capacity for 16 years as the Chief Executive Officer of the County of Rensselaer. Can you talk from your perspective about what it's like to work in local government in New York State?
I have always loved local government, and when I talk with school children, for instance, in high schools, I encourage them to think about a career in local government, because every day you get to go to work and make a difference for somebody in your community. And that's a good feeling at the end of the day, to go home and know that you've had a positive impact for somebody when they needed you. I worked in state government briefly, and I enjoyed that tremendously. But there, the reaction is a little bit more distant. It's time-wise and actual distance from people. In local government, you hear when you stop at the corner store for a half a gallon of milk how things are going, good, bad, or indifferent. You hear when you go to church. You hear when you go to the firehouse breakfast. The feedback is immediate, and that's a wonderful thing to get, because when things are going well, you hear that. When they're not, you hear that too, and you have the opportunity to take that back, improve services, say, how can I be of more help to that person? I was at a breakfast just 2 days ago, and there was an issue raised about an ambulance in one of our towns. So that's on my to-do list today. But it's good when you can hear from people what they need and be able to address that. That's the wonderful part about local government, is that closeness to the people, that ability to make a difference in their life. And I think we have. When I look at what we've accomplished over the last 16 years, we've worked with our businesses to create over 7,000 jobs in Rensselaer County. We've worked with our college to continue its growth by adding buildings, and they're up to over 11,000 students a year that are going through Hudson Valley Community College. We've worked with our communities to address the issues of underage drinking and drug use, and now the opioid crisis that's hitting us all. We have a very active coalition of over 600 people on our email list that come together every 6 weeks to talk about how can we make a difference. We've worked to shore up all of the services that people expect, whether they are the mandated services or whether they're the local services. And all of this, by working as a terrific team. I've had a wonderful team of department heads, a wonderful team of county employees, all dedicated to making Rensselaer County the great place that it is to live, work, and to raise a family. So we've had a great run, and I'm very grateful that the voters gave me the opportunity to serve.
Kathleen Jimino, you have done a wonderful job. Take note of that. Be proud of what you've accomplished in New York State for the people of Rensselaer County and for the people all across the state working through the New York State Association of Counties. As the president-elect of the Association of Counties, a longtime board member and officer of NYSAC, we thank you very much for what you've done for NYSAC and for the people of Rensselaer County. I'd like to thank the Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting Corporation again, its president, John Signer, its board of directors, for allowing the County Corner to continue. Thank you very much.